I can say generally that every spy is making you a damage, because the fact that the spy is in the surroundings of officers, people who are close to state secrets, it's harming.
Shin Bet was penetrated. There was the research in Biological Research Institute was penetrated. I know that there have been some cases in which were not published, and therefore I cannot talk about it. It's a question of censorship and gag orders, and as a law-abiding Israeli citizen, I don't break the law.
I can tell you for sure that not 100% of the spies were revealed or found by the Israeli agencies.
Israel has never made any secret of using espionage against its enemies and friends for many decades, not least in Lebanon, Iran, and in Gaza. It often boasts that its intelligence agencies like Mossad and Shin Bet are the most effective in the world. It uses agents, high-tech surveillance, and sophisticated planned operations, like the pager attacks on Hezbollah in Lebanon in September 2024. Espionage is a global game played by the world's most influential powers in war and peacetime.
One of the strengths of the ISA is the connections, the cooperation that we have with the American and the British intelligence. This is very important. There is a way of cooperation, we share with them, they share with us. Counterintelligence, its counter-espionage system is working very successfully because of, the long experience that we are doing it for so many years. There are so many cases.
But sometimes Israel's high-tech intelligence operations have faltered. Despite their reputation, mistakes are made and failures occur, like the 1973 Arab-Israeli War and the 7th of October 2023. This film examines some of these failures and counter-espionage by Israel's enemies using spies to inform on their own country.
Now, I'm hearing very much lately all the stories of that we have a case of treason. That's not true. What happened in the 7th of October was a colossal failure of intelligence, of operational, and of technical faults.
In this case of 7th of October, we didn't have intelligence, any concrete intelligence about what they are going to do tomorrow. And even on the night, early morning of 7th of October, when there were some signals that something maybe is developing inside Gaza among the Hamas, the decision was to see it as an exercise. And they were preparing for it for at least 2 years. And we didn't know about it. We didn't have a clue. So in the case of October 7th, the intelligence failure is much worse than in 73.
The security breach that allowed the Hamas-led attack on southern Israel to take place in October 2023 caused some analysts to think about other intelligence failures. Had Israel previously been compromised by foreign intelligence agencies but covered it up? We hear from a former director of the internal security agency Shin Bet and a journalist specializing in intelligence and strategic affairs.
The Soviet Union, the KGB, the GRU managed to almost to penetrate every aspect of the Israeli society. Many of them were recruited through the immigration waves. Always immigrations and waves and refugees and movement of people are a good hunting ground to recruit spies.
Most potential spies are lured into this murky world for two main reasons: ideology and money. In the former Soviet Union and the old Eastern Bloc countries, intelligence agencies, particularly the KGB, found Jewish immigration to Israel in the 1950s fertile ground for recruitment. They exploited the immigrants' experience of communism and their need for money to recruit hundreds of spies and deploy them in key Israeli institutions.
Actually, the Soviets had a few success stories of recruiting Israeli agents. And the first one, which I would like to mention, is Professor Kurt Sitte, who was a professor in the Technion, the Israeli Technology Institute in Haifa. He actually was running by the Czech intelligence, but the Soviets were very much involved in it because Kurt Sitte, who was a senior scientist, had an access kind of engagement with the Israeli nuclear program that started to be developed at that time.
كان على علاقة تواصل ومراقبة للجنة الطاقة الإسرائيلية، وهي أهم اللجان اللي هي بتقوم على عمل مفاعل ديمونة. استمر في عمله، كان يسافر لمؤتمرات دولية كثيرة بسبب عمله طبعا، وهذا كان يأخذ غطاء في لقائه بمشغليه التشيك من جهاز المخابرات التشيكي.
Professor Kurt Sitte was one of the world's leading experts in cosmic rays, and Czech intelligence managed to recruit him. When he arrived in Israel in 1954, Sitte got a job at the Israel Institute of Technology, Technion, which enabled him to pass on crucial military information. The Israeli authorities closely monitored Sitte's meetings with his handler at the Czech embassy and arrested him in 1960. Sitte confessed to espionage and was sentenced to 5 years in prison.
الطريف في الأمر حاجتين، إنه رقم واحد العلماء الإسرائيليين تدخلوا وقدموا عدة عرائض لرئيس الجمهورية ورئيس الوزراء للإفراج عنه باعتباره عالم، ولكن الجزء الآخر الأهم أن الموساد والشين بيت فيما بعد اكتشفوا أن CIA تعلم أنه كان مجند لحساب استيبا التشيكي ولم تبلغ الموساد.
Israel never revealed how much damage Sitte caused, but soon after, another case came to light. Senior Army Lieutenant Colonel Israel Be'er worked with Israeli Prime Minister and Defense Minister David Ben-Gurion. He was arrested in early 1961. Be'er had been seen delivering a briefcase full of files to his handler at the Soviet embassy. The Israeli investigation said he'd provided the embassy with Defense Ministry intelligence.
Israel Be'er is a very interesting case because he immigrated to Israel in the early 40s, and he wrote a few books about military and strategy here in Israel, and somehow he became an advisor to the Prime Minister and the Ministry of Defense of Israel at that time, of David Ben-Gurion. He was talking to every military gathering in Israel, and he was speaking with a lot of confidence, and everybody thought that he is prestigious, and people in the military would share with him, would ask for his advice.
Be'er confessed that he spied for ideological reasons. He strongly believed that the Soviet Union would become the world's most influential superpower and that Israel should be its ally. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison, but the damage he caused remained classified.
Israel Ber was one of the most powerful, and I would say most of the harmful spies that Israel had. Damage is considered to be something that Israel is not ready to say it openly. That Israel is leaving it in a secret. If Israel Ber was a part of a secret consultants at the Prime Minister office, and there they were talking about tactics. This kind of information is a very big benefit to the other side.
Around the same time as the Bear case, another spy was recruited purely for money. In the summer of 1948, Polish immigrant Lucjan Levi arrived in the newly established state of Israel. He quickly got a job at Shin Bet. His Polish handlers showered him with large sums of money, enabling him to live a lavish lifestyle in Tel Aviv. He was always photographing his Shin Bet colleagues and knew about most of their operations.
Polish Jew by the name of Lucjan Levi, who worked for the operation department of the Shin Bet, which one of its main roles was actually to sneak into Eastern European embassies in Tel Aviv and to bug them. So he was like the coyote who was ordered to guard the milk.
هو تعلم وعارف كل المعلومات الخاصة ب عند الشين بيت فيما يتعلق بهذه السفارات، بما فيه السفارة البولندية والسفارة السوفيتية بالطبع. والشين بيت كان بيقوم بعمليات مراقبة الدبلوماسيين الأجانب، وأنا كنت أحد ضحاياهم في هذا الموضوع.
Levy passed on intelligence to his Polish handlers, who in turn shared it with Moscow. He continued spying for 9 years until 1957. But another immigrant who'd worked with Polish intelligence arrived in Israel and implicated Levy under interrogation. His trial lasted for 3 years, but his story remained confidential.
So he also caused a lot of damage because he knew about all the plans or the operations of the Shin Bet, the Israeli security services, against the Russian and the Bulgarian and the Romanian and the Polish and the Czech embassies in Tel Aviv. He warned them in advance, tomorrow or in 2 days' time, there is an operation against you. So it gave them an opportunity to fool the Israelis.
الحقيقة أن هذا تسبب في ضرر كبير للشين بيت، واضطر أيضا وده الأهم أنه يغير كل أساليب عمله وكل الأسماء الحركية التي لم يعلم الجاسوس البولندي شخصياتها الحقيقية. هذا تكلف كثيرا. ظل ذلك يؤثر على عمل الشين بيت، وظل يؤثر في أنهم دائما متشككين لا يكون لديهم أحد جاسوس من الداخل.
But counter-espionage against Israel wasn't limited to the Soviets and the Poles. In 1954, Israel recruited a network of Jewish agents to plant explosives in American and British facilities in Egypt. Operation Susanna, also known as the Lavon Affair, aimed to sabotage Western relationships with the Egyptian authorities. Egyptian intelligence discovered the network and prosecuted all except its leader, Avri Elad. Israel accused Elad of treason after suspecting he'd been recruited by the Egyptians as a double agent. The case shook Israel and ultimately forced Israeli Defense Minister Pinhas Lavon to resign.
The case of Avri Elad, or as we called in Israel, the third man, that's a serious case. He was a traitor who betrayed an entire network of Egyptian Jews who worked for the Israeli intelligence. Two of them were hanged, Others were sentenced to many, many years in jail.
Egypt also looked for opportunities to recruit Israeli spies. In 1963, an Israeli, Sami Baruch, walked into the Egyptian embassy in Switzerland. He'd lost a lot of money in a failed textile business in Israel, and he offered his services to Egyptian intelligence. They gave Baruch a passport and sent him to Cairo for training, and then on to spy in Israel. They gave him money to hire Eastern European workers for his factory, and they became his spy network. But Baruch was spotted in Switzerland getting off an Egyptian Airlines plane, and the Israelis became suspicious. He sent some reports to Egypt, but he was arrested and sentenced to 18 years in prison.
يعني سامي باروخ على سبيل المثال هو الذي ذهب إلى المصريين وليس المصريون الذين جندوه، وحاول الحصول كما هو معروف بسيرته على قروض أو ديون من صهره أو من مصارف أخرى، لم يتمكن من تحقيق ذلك الأمر، فعنده نوع من الدافع المالي وربما دافع الغضب انه ما حدا ساعده، فذهب الى الاستخبارات المصريه، والاستخبارات المصريه في اي حال بظن قامت بواجبها، دربته جيدا وقالت له ماذا عليه ان يفعل، لكن يبدو انه هو مش رجل استخبارات، هو رجل اعمال بالاساس، وحتى لو دربته مش بالضروره ان يتقن وظيفته الجديده، فكشف.
As part of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, there were counter-espionage attempts by Palestinian groups. Some, based in Syria, tried to build connections with the Israeli socialist movement as a ploy to infiltrate the political heart of Israel. They made contact with members of an Arab-Jewish network in Israel called the Red Front. This was a left-wing Marxist, anti-Zionist organization that included Jews and Palestinians, best known with the Israeli Ehud Adiv and the Palestinian Daoud Turki. In 1972, Adiv went to Syria and met Palestinian armed groups. But Shin Bet had the Red Front under close surveillance. They planted listening devices in their meeting places and arrested all of them.
It was one of the first cases of betrayal of young people who were considered to be the best of this society. Udi was not the only one. Udi and Dani went to Syria and talked to the PLO representative there. They were thinking of having some common struggle, like in South Africa.
برأي أودي أديف ومعه طبعا داود تركي من حيفا، هن الزنبرك أو الدينامو تبع هذه المجموعة التي لم تكبر كثيرا. علينا أن ننتقل إلى العمل المسلح لإسقاط الصهيونية بإسرائيل وإقامة نظام اشتراكي عربي موحد. ومن أجل هذه العقيدة ذهبوا إلى قبرص واليونان وتركيا وبيروت ودمشق وتدربوا على السلاح، لكن فعليا لم يرتكبوا أي جريمة.
So first they were charged with having contact with the enemy. Then came also the charge of the spying against Udi Adiv. The espionage that was related to him was based on the fact that while he met the activists in Syria, he wanted to show that he is really loyal to the idea, and he spoke about his experience as a paratrooper. And therefore he's being mentioned nowadays as the spy, the Israeli spy.
فكرة التجسس لا تنطبق عليهم على الإطلاق. هذه المحكمة الإسرائيلية أرادت ذلك، والاستخبارات الإسرائيلية أرادت أن يعني تحطم معنوياتهم وسمعتهم، إنه هذول جواسيس للسوريين.
Therefore, the punishments were so hard in order to deter other people from joining this idea.
Ehud Adiv saw himself as a revolutionary, fighting to achieve universal justice. But he was tried for espionage in an Israeli court and sentenced to 17 years in prison. Another activist, Sylvia Klingberg, married him in prison in 1975, hoping to use Israeli public opinion to bring about his release. Sylvia's father was Marcus Klingberg, a founder of the Israeli Institute for Biological Research.
L'un des amis de ma mère, Oudi Adib, il se fait arrêter pour fait d'espionnage au profit des Syriens, je crois. Et en signe de solidarité avec lui, ma mère se marie avec lui dans la prison. Et mon grand-père l'accompagne au moment du mariage. Ce qui paraît complètement fou à l'époque, parce que il sait d'abord qu'il exerce une fonction exposée.
However, Marcus Klingberg was arrested in 1983. Shin Bet had long been suspicious about him, and they set a trap, saying they wanted him to travel to Asia. But when he left the house on the day of his trip, he was taken for interrogation. Under Shin Bet questioning, Klingberg confessed to spying for the Soviet Union decades earlier. His case remained secret until 1985, when a British journalist went to Tel Aviv planning to interview Klingberg for an investigative report on chemical weapons.
So I arrived in Israel and I checked in with the Israeli Defense Forces because he worked in this Chemical and Biological Weapons Institute. They said, Marcus Klingberg, you want to see Marcus Klingberg? No, he disappeared.
Mon grand-père est arrêté en 1983. À l'époque, j'ai 3 ans. On lui a fait croire qu'il avait un voyage à Singapour. Une voiture l'attend en bas de chez lui à Tel Aviv. Et en fait, au lieu de l'emmener à l'aéroport, la voiture l'entraîne dans un lieu d'interrogatoire. Et au bout de 1 ou 2 jours, donc assez rapidement en réalité, il finit par avouer qu'il a espionné au profit de l'Union soviétique. Il avoue au moment où ceux qui procèdent à l'interrogatoire lui disent qu'ils connaissent l'adresse de sa fille et de son petit-fils. Tout s'est fait à huis clos. Et donc mon grand-père reçoit à l'époque la peine maximale, c'est-à-dire la peine de 20 ans. Pendant une dizaine d'années, il y est sous un faux nom. Et je me souviens que lorsqu'on entrait à la prison, il fallait donner un faux nom. Il n'était plus Marcus Klingberg, il était Avraham Greenberg.
Marcus Klingberg's daughter, Sylvia, when she had seen this piece that I had written in The Observer, was determined to try and get her father out of jail.
Israel's intelligence services have the reputation of being among the most sophisticated in the world. But espionage is a double-edged sword, and Israel itself has sometimes fallen victim to covert enemy activity. Yet it always seems to manage to play these failures down or keep them out of the public domain. In this film, we're looking at cases in which the Soviet Union, Iran, and other intelligence services recruited Israelis to spy on their own country. One of these was the Israeli epidemiologist Marcus Klingberg. He was arrested by Shin Bet in 1983, interrogated, and confessed to having spied for the Soviet Union. Israel imposed a gagging order on the Klingberg family. But Klingberg's daughter, Sylvia, was determined to get her father released. She and her French lawyer reached a secret agreement with the Soviet Union for a spy swap deal with Israel. It was arranged by East German lawyer Wolfgang Vogel on the Soviet side and Amnon Zechroni for Israel.
On a une réunion dans mon bureau, c'était pas celui-là, j'étais rue de Rivoli à l'époque, avec Sylvia, avec Vogel, qui ne parlait qu'allemand, avec Zechroni. Et là, Sylvia et moi, on assiste à une espèce de jeu de ping-pong, dont les balles de ping-pong sont des noms d'espions. Zechroni, moi je veux polar. Alors, Pollard était un espion israélien qui était arrêté aux États-Unis parce qu'il avait fait manifestement la même chose qui était reprochée à Klingberg d'avoir fait, et il s'était fait condamner aussi, d'ailleurs. Et puis, je veux Ron Arad. Ron Arad est un pilote de l'armée israélienne qui avait été abattu de mémoire au-dessus du Liban, et Vogel disait « Eh ben moi, je veux Klingberg ». Et puis, malheureusement, dans le même mois d'août, à un moment, il me dit « Tout est annulé ». Et là, on devait être près de la fin de l'Union soviétique.
The fall of the Soviet Union in 1991 torpedoed the spy exchange deal. So the Klingbergs appealed for Marcus's release on humanitarian grounds. His health had declined badly after 15 years of a life sentence.
Bon, et donc ensuite, notre stratégie a évidemment changé et nous avons plaidé pour une libération sur une base humanitaire. Ça a été long, mais au final, on y est arrivé, notamment parce qu'on a eu le soutien d'un certain nombre de personnalités et aussi l'ancien chef du Shin Bet.
I went to the Prime Minister, to Yitzhak Rabin, and I told Yitzhak Rabin that I think that we have reached to the stage that we can parole him. The system didn't want. They all went against me because he was the worst spy, etc., and the damage. And I told the court that my understanding that from humanitarian reasons, and the court received my recommendation, and he was released.
But Israel kept Klingberg under close surveillance. He still had details of their biological weapons, which he'd leaked to the Soviet Union. Israeli intelligence considered Klingberg the worst kind of traitor because he'd informed on one of the country's most secretive institutions.
His wife also worked for the KGB and others, I think, in the institute also, but we don't know about that. One of his ideas was, if I'm giving information which, okay, is top secret to the Soviet Union, and they are building these weapons, and the Americans have these weapons, and now we have a balance. And so hopefully that balance will equal out, and they won't go to war.
Klingberg got his wish in that the US and the Soviet Union never did go to war. But 3 years after his arrest, there was another Israeli security breach. Mordechai Vanunu was an Israeli technician at the nuclear research center known as the Dimona reactor. In the summer of 1986, he secretly gathered information and photographs and gave them to the British newspaper, the Sunday Times.
الضرر الأكبر الذي تسبب فيه فانونو لإسرائيل كان هو كشف سر الأسرار وقدس الأقداس. سر الأسرار هو القدرات النووية الإسرائيلية. قدس الأقداس هو البرنامج العسكري النووي الإسرائيلي. الحقيقة أنها لم تكن حالة تجسس على الإطلاق، بل كانت حالة إخفاق أمني ومخابراتي من جانب أجهزة المفاعل ديمونة والأجهزة المخابراتية في استكشاف أن هذا الرجل كان لديه قصور في الشخصية.
He was asked, when you change your mind about Israel? And he said it was in 1982 at the First Lebanon War. And he said that at that time, he decided that Israel, the behavior of the state of Israel is risking the world because, according to his knowledge, that's what he said, Israel have nuclear capabilities, and he thinks that Israel is risking the security of the whole world.
The Israeli external intelligence agency Mossad only found out about Vanunu after the Sunday Times checked the photos and information. They then lured him to Italy, drugged him, and took him back secretly to Israel. Vanunu spent 18 years in jail. When he was released in 2004, he was barred from speaking to journalists and remains under close surveillance.
بمجرد وصوله لم تستطع الموساد وقف ما هو النزيف المعلوماتي، لأنه هو كان سلم بالفعل التقارير بتاعته وال65 صورة. فنشرت صحيفة الساندي تايمز تقرير مذهل فيما يتعلق بكافة التفاصيل التي لم يكن يعرفها الدوائر النووية في الدول حتى الغربية. كان هذا هو الطامة الكبرى بالنسبة لإسرائيل.
But the Vanunu affair was not the end of it. Shortly before the collapse of the Soviet Union, reports emerged in 1990 about the recruitment of Reserve Colonel Shimon Levinson. He was a senior Israeli military intelligence officer who worked for Mossad, but then as head of security at the office of the Prime Minister. After being lured to Tel Aviv, Levinson admitted that he went to the Soviet embassy in Bangkok in 1983 and later visited Moscow for instructions from his handlers. He said he'd demanded large sums of money in return.
This is an unbelievable case because Shimon Levinson was considered in Israel to be, many people knew him, considered to be somebody who beyond suspicious. He was a lieutenant colonel in the army for many years. He was living in Jerusalem. People know him. He got this position of the head of the security of the Prime Minister's office, which gave him fantastic access to the most sensitive information that can be, meaning that, you know, every government meeting, every meeting of the cabinet of defense.
The information that Levinson leaked to the Soviet Union remained classified. His arrest and trial stayed secret until 1993, when he was sentenced to 12 years in prison.
Shimon Levinson was a part of the Prime Minister ministry. And of course, there are concentrations and all kinds of papers that are produced by the intimate staff of the Prime Minister, and it is the high secrets of the country that nobody wants to talk about them openly. And if a spy knows it, the other countries knows it, and damage is done.
With Shimon Levinson, it's much more easier. It's just money. And I personally met him as well. When I heard that Shimon Levinson was compromised as a Soviet agent, I thought it's a nightmare. I couldn't believe that something like this happened because Shimon Levinson was one of us.
Levinson turned out to be one of them, a major Soviet asset. But there was a shift in international espionage when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. Vasily Mitrokhin was a KGB archivist who spent years copying top-secret documents. But in 1992, he defected to Britain and gave some of the KGB archives to British intelligence. They then shared names of some of the Israeli agents who'd spied for the Soviet Union with Israeli intelligence. Israel banned publication of these documents, but that didn't stop the British historian Christopher Andrew publishing the spies' names in a book he co-wrote with Vasily Mitrokhin called The KGB in the World.
This Mitrokhin was a KGB officer, and when he was interviewed, he spoke also, he knew, obviously, about Israel as well. Luckily, most of what he have shared there was already known to the ISA. But by the way, it's interesting, he didn't, in a few cases, he didn't know the real name. He knew only the code name. Immediately after he was defected and was interviewed, already the information that has to be of interest to Israel was transferred to Israel through the intelligence channels of cooperation.
The collapse of the Soviet Union also made it easier to conduct business in Eastern European countries. Israeli businessman Nahum Manbar was based in Poland. At the time, Iran urgently needed weapons after its 8-year war with Iraq. Manbar seized the opportunity, and between 1992 and 93, he effectively helped Iran develop chemical and biological weapons. but his trips to Iran attracted Mossad's attention.
Talking about the big damages that caused to Israeli national security, one can remember Nahum Manbar. Nahum Manbar was a businessman who sold chemicals to Iran. The Israeli law doesn't differentiate between espionage or contact with a foreign agent. He was arrested by the Israeli Security Service, the Shin Bet, and the Mossad.
Former paratrooper Nahum
Israeli investigators probed Manbar for detailed information, but he continued to insist that Shin Bet and Mossad knew all along about his business dealings with Iran. However, in 1998, an Israeli court convicted him of treason and what it called aiding the enemy, and sentenced him to 16 years in jail.
The Israeli service knew about his ties to Iran. He was followed also by the Mossad guys when he was in Europe. And while he was followed, there was a car accident and 2 Mossad agents were killed. Yes, he was a pain in the neck.
And it was very, very damaging. It was serious, and it was astonishing that an Israeli would cooperate with the enemy.
Following the Manbar case, both Israel and Iran aimed to recruit agents on the ground. Israel didn't seem to be able to prevent the Iranian recruitment, and this led to more security breaches. There were reports that Mossad accused one of their own agents, Ben Zigir, of exposing details of a secret mission to Iran. Mossad arrested Zigir and kept his case secret, but it all came out when Zigir took his own life in 2010 in a maximum security cell, monitored 24/7.
There is a case which was reported abroad of Ben Zigir, an Australian Jew who emigrated to Israel out of Zionist ideology, was recruited by the Mossad, was in operations in the Mossad, in operations which were directed against Iran, against Iran's nuclear capabilities. And then he talked to some people. He wanted to boost how important he is, what a secret mission he has been involved in. And he caused a great deal of damage. And he was arrested, and he was in Israeli jail. And he was not properly guarded in jail and committed suicide.
Israeli intelligence tends to play down Iranian attempts to recruit spies from within, including the case of the former Minister of Energy and Infrastructure, Gonan Segev, in 2018. Segev admitted spying for Iran since 2012, providing them with sensitive information about security, energy resources, and names of officials. Israel banned the publication of details of the Segev case after he was sentenced to 11 years in prison in 2019.
Gonan Segev is an exception. It's really a big surprise that someone who was a minister, a former minister, a doctor, a medical doctor, a member of the parliament, and then he volunteered to spy for the Iranians and even traveled to Tehran twice. But I think the Israeli intelligence, the security services, almost very quickly got hold of him. They tricked him, basically, to bring him back to Israel. He was kind of kidnapped from another African country.
الإيرانيون الذين جندوا وزير الطاقة الإسرائيلي في إحدى المراحل بقي حتى الآن مجرد معلومة يحاكم أمام إسرائيل، لكن مثل أي حدث استخباري من هذا المستوى نحن لم نعرف على الإطلاق مستوى المعلومات ومدى مخاطرها وما هي الأضرار التي أوقعها بالإسرائيليين وما هي الفوائد التي قدمها للإيرانيين.
Despite trying to keep cases like Segev's under wraps, reports about Iranian spies continued to come out. Like Omri Goren Gorochovsky, arrested in 2021 for dealing with a group of hackers linked to Iran called Black Shadow. He worked as housekeeper for then Defense Minister Benny Gantz, offered information about Gantz and to install malware on his computer, all for a mere $7,000. It was another blow to Shin Bet, especially when it emerged that Goren had a long criminal record, including robberies, and had never been properly vetted before going to work for Benny Gantz.
All the cases that you have mentioned, Omri Goren, Gonen Segev, and others, are really not worth of, they didn't make any harm.
No, Omri it's not serious. This is, I don't think this is the case that he was recruited by the Iranians.
But even if Omri Goren and Gonen Segev were, as it were, not serious, October 7th definitely was. Spying had been a crucial activity on both sides of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for decades. But by any standards, the Hamas-led attack on southern Israel on the 7th of October 2023 was the biggest security breach in Israel's history. What happened that day was unprecedented and led to an even more violent Israeli response. It also raised serious questions about Israeli intelligence. 6 months later, Military Intelligence Director Aharon Haliva resigned. His resignation letter included a request to set up an investigation to provide accurate answers as to what happened on October 7th.
It's not just an attack, it's invasion. We didn't think that the Hamas could invade to Israel. It's unbelievable that 50 years and one day after Yom Kippur War, something quite similar happened to us as well. The failure of the intelligence here is worse than in 73, and it's not just the intelligence, also the forces, the IDF forces who were on the border were not prepared.
يعني ربما نعتبر 7 أكتوبر نموذج لعمل عسكري يستند إلى معلومات استخبارية. بطبيعة الحال كل عمل عسكري مهم إذا ما كان عنده معلومات تسبق تنفيذ العمل، أي هذه المعلومات يعني تمدنا بخطة العمل. فأنا برأيي كان في تجمع أو تجميع لمعلومات كثيرة عن الهدف اللي كانوا عم يستعدوا له حركة حماس، وهذا ما إجا يعني مش بالتخيل، مش وضعوا الخطة وما بيعرفوا شو في قدامهم، وضعوا الخطة وهم عارفين شو في قدامهم، وهذه نتيجة الوسائل المتعددة لجمع المعلومات فيما يتعلق بالهدف المطلوب.
The October 7th attack by Hamas was a great humiliation. Israel was surprised, Israel was complacent, Israel was arrogant, and when I say Israel, it's from top to the bottom. It's from the prime minister, the government, the military, the chief of staff, the head of the Shin Bet and the Shin Bet. All of them are rightly accused of this intelligence failure. So that's what happened on October the 7th. In that sense, it can be compared to the Israeli failure before the 73 war.
It's a failure that we will have to interrogate. I don't think that it's because of treason. And those who are were the chiefs of the army, of the intelligence, will have to go home. That's it.
After October 7th, there were reports about Israelis being recruited by Iranian agents. In September 2024, the security services arrested Israeli businessman Moti Maman. They accused him of involvement in assassination attempts plotted by Iran on prominent Israeli figures. Maman had asked the Iranians for $1 million. Then, in October 2024, the authorities arrested a network of Israeli citizens they suspected of spying for Iran. They were accused of taking photographs and collecting information on highly sensitive bases and facilities.
Nowadays, we are viewing scenes of espionage mainly from the Iranian side. The Iranians are trying to penetrate into Israeli army, Israeli security agencies. We have spotted several times trials of the Iranians to recruit Israeli citizens, but there wasn't a big success.
The intelligence failures described in this film are not isolated events. They've taken place in a system that believes it can know and control everything, that its power, technology, and alliances will always be enough. In the war between the US and Israel and Iran, intelligence agencies use the language of threat and risk, which has brought the whole of the Middle East to the brink of catastrophe. History suggests that no side can bomb or spy its way out of a conflict, that security cannot be built on fear alone, and that ignoring the rights and lives of ordinary people, Israeli, Palestinian, Iranian, Lebanese, and many others, will continue to create the very threats that intelligence services aim to prevent.